Hello, guys. I'm back, and I wanted to come up here today and talk about the 8 interview questions that show up over and over again in a data analyst interview. Here's what a lot of people don't realize. Most candidates don't fail interviews because they don't know SQL. They fail because they fail to understand how to explain what it is they know. So I'm going to give you guys 8 questions you're likely to hear, show you exactly how I would answer them. And at the end, I'm going to tell you one thing about technical interviews that most people don't figure out until they've failed a few already. Let's start with the most common question you will probably hear on an interview. You're almost definitely going to get the question, tell me about yourself. And people mess that question up all the time. They either talk too long or they tell their whole life story, or they just start talking about stuff that has nothing to do with the job. Don't do that. Here's a simple formula I want you guys to remember. I am, I have, I'm here because. That's it. For example, I'm a data analyst with experience working with SQL, Power BI, and Tableau. I've used SQL to pull and analyze data. I've built dashboards that help businesses track KPIs, identify trends, and make better decisions. I'm here because I'm looking for an opportunity where I can continue to use those skills while growing as a data analyst. That's it. That's a good answer right there. You told them who you are, you told them what you can do, and you told them why you're sitting in front of them right now. I am, I have, I'm here because. Write those 3 things down and build your answer around them. Don't give them an autobiography. Don't tell them your life story. Your goal is to give them enough information to make them want to ask you the next question. Now they're probably going to start digging into your technical skills. And if you're interviewing for a data analyst position, SQL is probably going to come up. They might ask, how comfortable are you with SQL? Be careful here. Don't say, I'm a 10 out of 10, because you know what's going to happen next. They're going to start looking for question number 11. Instead, tell them what you can actually do. I would say something like, I'm very comfortable working with SQL. I've worked with joins, subqueries, CTEs, aggregate functions, window functions, string functions, and I've used SQL to pull, analyze, and transform data for reporting. Notice what I didn't do. I didn't give myself an arbitrary number. I gave evidence. If you say you're good at SQL, tell me what you can do with SQL, because that's actually what the interviewer wants to know. Here's another question you're probably most definitely going to hear, and that's, what's the difference between an inner join and a left join? Now listen, the interviewer isn't only testing whether you memorize the SQL definition. They're testing whether you can explain something technical clearly and concisely. So don't make it complicated. Just tell them the truth. An inner join brings back corresponding records from both tables, and a left join brings back the entire left table and only where there are corresponding matches in the table to the right of the clause. That's it. And then you give them an example. If I have a customers table and I have an orders table, an inner join gives me the customers who have orders. A left join gives me every customer, including customers who haven't ordered anything. And then stop talking. You answered the question. One of the worst things you can do in an interview is turn a 30-second answer into a 5-minute lecture. Sometimes people know the answer, but they talk themselves right out of a good answer. Keep it simple. Show them that you understand. Then let the interviewer decide where they want to go next. Eventually, they're going to stop asking you, what is this questions and questions that you can memorize answers. They're going to start asking questions like, what would you do if this happened? Because now they want to see whether you can actually solve a problem. Let's say they ask you a question like, you have a report running slow. What would you do to fix that issue? The first thing I would say is I would take a trace. That way I can know which particular stored procedure is being called. I would open up that particular stored procedure, and then I would convert it over to a script. Once you convert it over to a script, I would set statistics IO on, and I would also turn on my execution plan. I would comment out most of the stored procedure and run blocks of it to try to see which particular area is causing the bottleneck. Also, if an insert, update, or delete is being performed in the stored procedure, I would look at those particular tables that are being affected and see if they have indexes, because a lot of times that will slow down a query as well. I will look at my where clauses, because depending on how the where clause is set up, it might not allow us to use the index properly. Also, I will look at my select statements. Are we saying select asterisk? And do we need every column in that table? Sometimes you could be pulling 75 columns when all you really needed was 3. Truly, this question is really just a way for them to see how well you solve problems. What is your thought process when you're working through an issue? That's it. Now let's move away from SQL for a minute. If Power BI or Tableau is on your resume, there's a good chance they're going to ask, tell me about a dashboard you've built. Please don't say, I've built several dashboards, okay? What did they do? Tell a story. And here's another formula you can use. Problem, what I did, result. Start with the problem. The business needed a way to track performance, but the information was spread across several different reports. Then explain what you did. I used SQL to pull the necessary data, cleaned and transformed the data, created the data model, and built the dashboard in Power BI. Then talk about what you included. KPIs, trends, filters, drill throughs, whatever makes sense for your project. And finally, tell them the result. What did the dashboard allow somebody to be able to understand once you got done? Because understanding is everything. Companies are not paying people because you know how to make pretty charts. They're paying because you can take the data and turn it into information that helps somebody make an informed decision. That's the job. The next question they're probably going to ask you is, do you prefer Power BI or Tableau? Do not turn this into a religious debate, okay? Don't sit there telling the interviewer Power BI is better than Tableau. Meanwhile, the whole company uses Tableau. Read the room. If asked if you've worked on both of them, tell them. You could say something like, I've worked on both Power BI and Tableau. I'm comfortable with either one, although I spent more time working with Power BI. A lot of core concepts transfer between the tools. Understanding the data, modeling it correctly, choosing the right visualization, and communicating the information clearly. That's a much better answer, because the company probably already chose their tool. They're just trying to figure out if you know how to use it. Now here's a question that scares a lot of data analysts. Do you know Python? And some of you immediately are going to think, well, that's it. Didn't learn Python. Interview over. Don't do that. If you don't know Python, don't lie, but don't disqualify yourself either. Python isn't currently my strongest skill. My strongest technical skills are SQL and BI tools like Power BI and Tableau. I'm continuing to expand my Python knowledge, but I've been able to handle the majority of my data analysis work using SQL and BI tools. That's an honest answer. Now, should you learn Python? Absolutely. It's valuable. But I've seen many people get data analyst jobs without knowing any Python. Some of my students have gotten jobs and roles primarily just knowing SQL and BI tools, and then expanded their skills once they got there. So don't look at a job description with 15 different technologies listed on it and say, well, I don't know 8 of these. I guess I can't apply. Apply. Let them tell you no. Don't tell yourself no before you even get a chance to get in the room. And that brings us to the question no one ever prepares for. The question you don't know, because it's coming. I don't care how much you study. Eventually, someone is going to ask you something that you don't know. And you're going to be sitting there thinking, I have absolutely no idea, right? And that's okay. I've been working in tech for years, and I still don't know everything. Nobody does. The worst thing you can do is sit up there and try to make stuff up. Instead, you can say something like, I haven't personally worked with that technology, or I haven't worked with that yet, but based on what you're describing, here's the way I would try to approach it. Then reason your way through the problem. Or you could say something like, that's something I would need to research, but I'm confident I could get up to speed on that fairly quickly. There's nothing wrong with saying that you don't know something, but show them that when you don't know something, you know how to figure it out, because that's what technology is. I don't sit around with every answer just stored in my head. I know how to research. I know how to troubleshoot. I know how to test. I know how to figure things out. That's the main skill they're looking for. Now, let me tell you something I tell my students. You can know the answer and still fail the interview, because a technical interview isn't just about what you know. They're also sitting there asking themselves, can I work with this person? Can you communicate? Can you explain something technical without making it unnecessarily complicated? Can you listen? When you don't know something, do you panic? Can you take direction? Can you admit that you don't know something? And one of the biggest mistakes I see people make is trying to sound more experienced than they really are. Stop doing that. If you understand SQL, explain what you know. If you know Power BI, explain what you've actually built. If you know Tableau, talk about your experience with Tableau. If you don't know something, say you don't know and explain how you would go about learning. Technology isn't supposed to be difficult. I tell my students all the time, they don't pay people good money to do something everybody can learn in a weekend. You're going to struggle. You're going to get questions wrong. You may walk out of an interview knowing you absolutely screwed up. So what? Write down everything you ask, go home, study it, figure out the answers. Because guess what happens when somebody asks you that question again? Now you know the answer. That's how you get better. Interview, learn, study, interview again. You don't need to walk into your first data analyst interview knowing everything. You need enough knowledge to get yourself in the room and enough determination to keep getting better until someone finally says, when can you start? And guys, if you want help, go to www.ltvacademy.com. We offer nightly classes live where you can unmute, talk, share your screen, and I walk you through. I grab you by the hand. We walk you through SQL, Power BI, and all the different technologies. We give you note cards to prepare for interviews. We'll show you what to learn, how to practice it, and how to prepare yourself to actually get a job. That website, once again, is www.ltvacademy.com. Thank you.